You have 1 week to move out." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Amber's face twisted with rage as she reached for my Venice honeymoon vase, the blue one that had survived my divorce but wouldn't survive this moment. It crashed to the floor in 1,000 pieces, just like my faith in family. How had I gotten here, standing in my own apartment, being threatened by my brother's girlfriend who had just handed me a list of rules for visiting my own property? Let me tell you how it all began. 3 months earlier, I was enjoying a rare peaceful afternoon when Mom's call shattered my Netflix tranquility. Her voice carried that familiar manipulative sweetness that always preceded her requests. "Hey Ruby, how are you doing?" I should have hung up right then. My gut told me what was coming, the same way it had warned me about Mark's affairs before I caught him. But family loyalty, that poisonous virtue our parents had drilled into us since childhood, made me answer, "I'm good. Just relaxing." "What's up?" "Well, I need to ask you for a small favor, Jake." It was always about Jake. At 26, my brother had perfected the art of failing upward, bouncing from job to job, relationship to relationship, always landing softly in someone else's safety net. Growing up, while I was studying for honors classes and working part-time jobs, Jake was getting passes for incomplete homework because boys mature later. While I was saving every penny for college, Jake was getting his tuition paid because Ruby's so responsible, she'll figure it out. The pattern had been set early. Ruby solves problems, Jake creates them. "Your brother just moved out of his apartment," Mom continued. "His lease ended, and he's having some temporary money problems." Temporary. In Jake's vocabulary, that word meant anything from 3 weeks to 3 years. I knew exactly where this was heading, but I let her finish her performance. "Well, you have that empty apartment from your divorce with Mark. Jake needs somewhere to stay until he gets back on his feet." That apartment represented more than just real estate to me. After Mark's betrayal, after losing half of everything I'd worked for, that place was my insurance policy against ever being financially dependent on anyone again. I bought myself a nicer place in a better neighborhood, stretching my budget thin, with a plan to rent out the old apartment. The rental income would give me the breathing room I desperately needed. But family guilt is a powerful drug, and I was still addicted. "Mom, I was planning to rent that place out. I need the rental income to help with my mortgage." "I know, sweetie, but this is family we're talking about. You're doing so well at your marketing job, and he's struggling." The subtle dig wasn't lost on me. Ruby's doing well, so Ruby can sacrifice. Jake's struggling, so Jake deserves help. The math of family favoritism had always been simple. I closed my eyes, remembering the fights during my divorce when they'd barely offered emotional support, telling me I should work harder on my marriage, even after I'd told them about Mark's affairs. But Jake's temporary inconvenience demanded immediate family mobilization. "Fine. He can stay there temporarily, but I mean temporarily. Thank you so much, Ruby. Jake will be so grateful." She hung up before I could set conditions, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering why I always let them manipulate me into these situations. A week later, I met Jake at the apartment with his meager belongings. He looked exactly as I expected, casual, relaxed, like homelessness was just another adventure. The scent of cigarettes clung to his clothes, mixing with that cologne he'd worn since high school, the one that used to make girls swoon, but now just made him smell like delayed adolescence. "Hey sis, thanks for this. You're a lifesaver." His hug was quick, perfunctory, already taking my generosity for granted. I wanted to shake him, to ask when he'd last thanked anyone without expecting something in return, but instead I unlocked the door and stepped into my past. The apartment was clean and empty, furnished only with the basics I'd left behind after my divorce. Every piece held memories: the couch where Mark and I had planned our future, the dining table where we'd shared our last civil meal before everything fell apart. But I'd made peace with those ghosts. Now I was about to invite new ones in. "I need you to follow some rules while you're here," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Jake's expression flickered with annoyance before he masked it with false compliance. I'd seen that look before, usually right before he broke whatever promise he was about to make. "Sure, shoot. First, no moving anyone else in without my permission. Second, clean up after yourself. Third, no loud parties. Fourth, no pets without asking me first." Jake held up his hands in mock surrender. "Totally reasonable. I promise I'll be the perfect tenant. You won't even know I'm here." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. For the first few weeks, I was vigilant, stopping by after work unannounced like a suspicious landlord. To my surprise, Jake seemed to be keeping his promises. The apartment was reasonably clean, no strange people were living there, and he even cooked dinner for me a few times when I visited. "See, I told you I'd grown up," he said one evening as we ate pasta he'd prepared. The sauce was from a jar, and the pasta was slightly overcooked, but the gesture felt genuine. Maybe I'd been too harsh in my judgment. Maybe this time would be different. "I'm impressed," I admitted, and for a moment, we felt like siblings instead of adversaries. At our traditional Saturday family dinners, Mom and Dad were full of praise. "It's so good to see you two getting along," Mom said, serving her famous meatloaf. "Family should always help family." "I'm proud of you, Ruby," Dad nodded approvingly. "Jake says you've been really supportive." That's what siblings are for. Their approval washed over me like warm honey. For years, I'd felt like the responsible but unappreciated daughter, the one who followed rules while Jake broke them, the one who solved problems while Jake created them. But now, finally, I was the good daughter, the supportive sister. It felt intoxicating. After about 2 months, I relaxed my surveillance. Work demanded more of my attention, and I was dating someone new, a kind accountant named David, who actually returned my calls and remembered my birthday. Life felt stable for the first time since my divorce. I'd call Jake occasionally to check in, and his responses were always cheerful and reassuring. "Everything good over there?" "Yep, all good. Place is clean. Bills are paid. No wild parties." I should have known it was too good to be true. Success had never been Jake's strong suit, but deception certainly was. One Tuesday evening, I realized I'd left important documents in the filing cabinet in the apartment's spare bedroom. I needed them for a crucial client meeting the next day, so I drove over without calling first. The moment I reached the apartment door, I knew something had changed. Music pounded from inside, bass vibrating through the walls. This wasn't Jake's usual indie rock. This was party music, the kind that made neighbors complain and landlords evict. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered over the noise. Finally, I used my key. What greeted me stopped me cold. A young woman I'd never seen before was dancing around my living room wearing nothing but one of Jake's oversized t-shirts, her long blonde hair whipping around as she moved to the beat. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with shock before narrowing into pure anger. What the hell? Who are you and why are you breaking into our apartment? Our apartment. The words hit me like a slap. Hello, I'm talking to you. You can't just walk into someone's home with a key, she continued, grabbing a remote to turn down the music. Before I could find my voice, Jake appeared from the bedroom wearing only boxers, his face falling when he saw me. Ruby, I didn't know you were coming by. Clearly, I managed to say. Who is this? The girl crossed her arms defiantly. I should be asking who you are. I'm Ruby. I own this apartment. Care to explain, Jake? This is Amber, my girlfriend. She needed a place to stay. The casualness of his admission made my blood pressure spike. And you moved her in without asking me, even though the first rule was not to move anyone in without my permission. Amber rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh my God. Are you serious right now? We're adults. Jake doesn't need your permission for who stays in his apartment. It's not his apartment, I said firmly. It's mine. Jake stepped between us, putting on his best pleading face, the same expression he'd used to get out of trouble since we were children. I remembered him using that exact look when he'd broken Mom's favorite lamp at age 8, when he'd crashed Dad's car at 16, when he'd dropped out of college at 19. Ruby, come on. I love her. We're really serious about each other. I was going to tell you, but I knew you'd get all uptight about it. Uptight. As if expecting basic respect for my property made me unreasonable. How long has she been living here? I asked, dreading the answer. About a month, Jake admitted. A whole month of lies. A whole month of broken trust. I took a deep breath, remembering the meditation techniques from my yoga class. Jake, can we talk privately for a minute? Anything you have to say to him, you can say in front of me, Amber cut in. Her presumption was breathtaking. I'd like to speak to my brother alone in my apartment, I said, emphasizing the last two words. Jake squeezed Amber's arm. Just give us a sec, babe. She huffed but stomped off to the bedroom, slamming the door with unnecessary force. Charming, I muttered once she was gone. She's just protective, Jake said. And you kind of freaked her out by just walking in. The audacity was stunning. Somehow, I was the villain for entering my own property. Jake, what the hell? We had an agreement, he sighed, running his hands through his messy hair. I know. But we've been together for 3 months, and her roommate kicked her out, and it just made sense. She's really great when you get to know her. I rubbed my temples, feeling a familiar headache building. Part of me wanted to tell them both to pack immediately and get out. But I knew the consequences. Mom and Dad would take Jake's side, painting me as the cold-hearted sister who threw her brother and his girlfriend onto the street. I'd be the villain at every family gathering for years to come. Fine, I said finally. She can stay too. But the other rules still apply. Keep the place clean. No parties, no pets without asking. Jake's face broke into a huge smile, and he hugged me with genuine enthusiasm. You're the best. I promise we'll follow all the other rules. You won't regret this. I already did, but I kept that thought to myself. As I gathered my documents, Amber emerged from the bedroom with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "So, I'm allowed to stay. How generous of you," she said, her tone dripping with mock gratitude. "Amber, be nice," Jake said weakly, but there was no real authority in his voice. "No, I'm serious." "Thank you, Ruby. But next time, maybe knock before using your key. It's kind of invasive to just walk in." She stepped in front of me and opened the door, her fake smile never wavering. "Bye now," she said, practically shoving me out of my own apartment. I stood in the hallway, stunned. Had my brother's girlfriend just kicked me out of my own property? That Saturday at family dinner, I told my parents about meeting Amber and described her behavior. "Isn't she lovely?" Mom beamed, completely ignoring what I'd just said. "Jake brought her over last week. Such a sweet girl." I nearly choked on my potatoes. Sweet was not a word I'd use to describe Amber. "She was incredibly rude to me," I protested. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "You probably just caught her off guard. Using your key without warning would startle anyone." "It's my apartment," I said, feeling like I was speaking a foreign language. "And they broke the rules we agreed on." "Oh, Ruby," Mom sighed. "You need to understand Jake's building a serious relationship here. They want to create a home together. In my apartment," I emphasized. Dad leaned forward with that patronizing expression he'd perfected over the years. "Can't you be happy for your brother? After your divorce, you should understand how important it is to find someone." The comment about my failed marriage stung deeply. They knew Mark had cheated, knew he'd betrayed every vow we'd made, yet somehow they were using my pain to guilt me about Jake's situation. My parents had offered minimal support during my divorce, suggesting I try harder and work on communication. But Jake's relationship deserved immediate family celebration and accommodation. "This isn't about my divorce," I said. "It's about Jake not respecting our agreement. Family is more important than rules," Mom said firmly. "You have 2 apartments, Ruby. Your brother has none. You can afford to be generous." I gave up trying to make them understand and changed the subject, but their words echoed in my mind for days. The following week brought new challenges. The utility bills for the apartment arrived, and my jaw dropped when I saw the amounts, nearly double what they'd been before. I called Jake immediately. "Have you seen the utility bills? They're twice as high as they should be. What's going on?" He hesitated, and I could practically hear him searching for an excuse. "Well, Amber likes to take really long baths, like really long. And she says she needs light to see, so she keeps all the lights on." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Jake, I'm paying those bills. I can't afford these kinds of increases." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her about it." "Please do." "I promise, sis. I'll handle it." But promises had become worthless currency in our relationship. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. Mrs. Patel, the elderly woman who lived across the hall, spoke in her gentle accent. "Miss Ruby, I am sorry to bother you, but there have been very loud parties in your apartment. Many nights, very late, too much noise, too many people." I apologized profusely while anger bubbled inside me. First the unauthorized roommate, then the bills, now parties. Jake had systematically broken every single rule. The next day, I drove to the apartment after work, my hands trembling with rage. I knocked on the door, then rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I tried my key, but it wouldn't turn in the lock. I stared at the door in disbelief, trying the key again and again, as if persistence would make it work. They had changed the locks. They had changed the locks to my apartment without my permission, without even telling me. I was beyond furious now. I was in shock. This level of disrespect was breathtaking in its audacity. I went to my car and waited, my mind racing through possible responses. 2 hours later, Jake and Amber appeared, walking toward the building entrance, laughing about something. They looked carefree, happy, completely unburdened by any sense of wrongdoing. I followed them inside and up the elevator, my presence like a dark cloud behind their sunshine. When they reached the apartment door, I called out, "Jake." He turned, his face dropping when he saw me. Amber looked annoyed, as if my presence in my own building was an inconvenience. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "We need to talk about why my key doesn't work anymore," I said. Jake at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "Ruby, I can explain. Let's talk inside." I pushed past Amber, who gave me a dirty look, but stepped aside. Inside, the apartment was messier than I'd ever seen it. Empty beer bottles lined the kitchen counter, pizza boxes were stacked on the dining table, and the living room furniture had been rearranged to accommodate what looked like regular party gatherings. "Why did you change the locks?" I demanded. Before Jake could answer, Amber jumped in with characteristic arrogance. "I didn't like the idea of you being able to just walk in whenever you wanted. It's creepy." I turned to Jake, hoping he'd show some backbone, some loyalty to his sister over his girlfriend. "Did you agree to this?" He looked at the floor, then nodded slightly. That small nod broke something inside me. "You know what? I've had enough. Mrs. Patel called me yesterday. She says you've been having loud parties." "That old bat needs to mind her own business," Amber muttered. "The neighbors are my business," I said. "And so are the utility bills, which have doubled since you moved in." Jake stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation with his usual avoidance tactics. "Ruby, can we talk about this later? When everyone's calmer." "No, we're talking about it now. You've broken every single rule we agreed on. You moved someone in without asking. You're not keeping the place clean. You're having parties. And now you've changed the locks to my property without my permission." Amber rolled her eyes and went to a drawer, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "Here," she said, shoving it into my hands. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a list of rules. If you want to visit your apartment, these are the conditions." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands, not believing what I was hearing. As I read through the list, my jaw dropped further with each ridiculous demand. 1. Ruby must give at least 3 days' notice before visiting. 2. No visits after 7 p.m. or before 10 a.m. 3. No discussion of bills during visits. 4. Ruby must be quiet while visiting and not create drama. 5. Ruby must buy new furniture since current items are old and ugly. 6. Ruby cannot bring dates or friends to the apartment. 7. Ruby must contribute to groceries if she wants to eat anything. 8. Ruby cannot use the bathroom during visits longer than 5 minutes. 9. Ruby must ask permission before opening windows or adjusting temperature. 10. Ruby cannot comment on cleanliness or organization. The list went on with increasingly absurd demands, each one more insulting than the last. I looked up from the paper to see Amber smirking triumphantly, while Jake looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Something snapped inside me at that moment. Not broke, snapped. Like a rubber band stretched too far. All the years of family manipulation, of putting everyone else's needs before my own, of being the responsible one who always sacrificed for others' convenience, suddenly reached their breaking point. A strange calm washed over me, the kind that comes when you finally stop caring about consequences and start caring about self-respect. "You have 1 week to move out," I said quietly. Their smug expressions vanished instantly. "What?" Jake sputtered. "You can't kick us out," Amber shouted. "We have rights. You're not on the lease." "There is no lease. This is my property, and I'm telling you that you have 1 week to find somewhere else to live." Amber's face contorted with pure rage, her mask of control finally slipping. She grabbed the blue glass vase from the bookshelf, the one I'd bought in Venice during my honeymoon with Mark. A beautiful piece that had somehow survived my divorce, but wouldn't survive this moment. She hurled it to the floor where it shattered into dozens of pieces, each fragment catching the light like tiny accusations. I flinched but kept my composure, my voice steady despite the violence. "That vase costs $200. You'll be reimbursing me." "Go to hell," she spat, reaching for another decorative item. "Touch anything else, and I'm calling the police," I warned. "Destruction of property is a crime." She froze, her hands still outstretched toward a ceramic bowl, perhaps realizing that her tantrum had legal consequences. 1 week, I repeated, then turned and walked out with my head held high. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Amber screaming obscenities while Jake tried weakly to calm her down. I walked to my car with dignity intact, but once inside, my hands started shaking. I'd never stood up to Jake like that before, never put my own needs above family peace. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. I had just pulled into my driveway when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I knew Jake had already called her with his version of events. "Hello," I answered, bracing myself. "Ruby, what is wrong with you?" She started immediately. "Jake just called us in tears. How could you kick your brother and his girlfriend out onto the street? Mom, they changed the locks to my apartment without asking me." "I'm sure they had their reasons," she dismissed. "You're always barging in without warning." Dad's voice came on the line, both parents teaming up against me, as they always did when Jake was involved. "Your mother and I are very disappointed in you, Ruby. After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Dad?" I interrupted. "I bought my own place. I'm paying my own mortgage. I'm letting Jake stay in my property rent-free, and he's taking advantage of me." "That girl seems lovely," Mom said. "Jake says you've been hostile toward her from the start." I laughed in disbelief. "Amber threw a vase at me today. She wrote out a list of rules that I have to follow to enter my own property." "You're exaggerating," Mom said dismissively. "Ever since Mark left you, you've been bitter." "We understand, sweetie, but don't take it out on your brother." The cruelty of that comment took my breath away. They were using my divorce, my pain, my betrayal, as a weapon against me to defend Jake's inexcusable behavior. I ended the call and turned off my phone, sitting in my car for a long time, letting the anger and hurt wash over me like waves. But underneath the pain, there was something else, a small, growing sense of freedom. The next day, I called my lawyer friend Sarah to confirm my legal rights. She assured me that since they weren't on any lease and the property was in my name, I could legally require them to leave with proper notice, which I'd given them. I also arranged for a locksmith to meet me at the apartment the following week. The days passed slowly, punctuated by Jake's calls that I let go to voicemail. His messages oscillated between angry accusations, "You're being totally unreasonable," and desperate pleas, "Please, Ruby, we have nowhere else to go." I didn't respond to any of them. Mom and Dad called too, leaving messages about how disappointed they were, how I was tearing the family apart, how I needed to stop being stubborn and make amends. I deleted these without listening to them completely. Finally, the week was up. I took the day off work and drove to the apartment, the locksmith scheduled to arrive an hour after me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was prepared for anything. I knocked on the door, and to my surprise, Jake answered almost immediately. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked exhausted, like he'd spent the week wrestling with consequences for the first time in his adult life. "We're almost done packing," he said quietly. I nodded and stepped inside. The apartment was chaos of boxes and bags everywhere, the detritus of a life being hastily dismantled. Amber was in the bedroom, shoving clothes into a suitcase with aggressive movements, her face a mask of resentment. "Where will you go?" I asked, despite myself. "Mom and Dad said we can stay with them until we figure something out," Jake replied, not meeting my eyes. I felt a tiny pang of guilt, which I quickly suppressed. This was the natural consequence of their actions, not some arbitrary punishment I was inflicting. We didn't speak much as they finished packing. Amber refused to look at me, moving around as if I were invisible, her silent treatment somehow more mature than her previous tantrums. When they were finally ready to leave, she threw the new keys onto the floor at my feet without a word, the metal clattering against the hardwood like coins for a toll. "Amber," Jake said weakly, but she was already out the door. Jake lingered for a moment, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a child who knows he's in trouble. "I'm sorry about the vase," he said finally. "And the locks. It was Amber's idea, but I went along with it." "You always go along with things, Jake," I said, speaking a truth we'd both avoided for years. "That's your problem." He nodded sadly, seeming to understand for perhaps the first time that his passivity had consequences. Then he picked up the last of his bags and left, closing the door gently behind him. After they were gone, I surveyed the damage to my apartment. The place looked like a hurricane had torn through it. There were stains on the carpet that I didn't want to identify, scuff marks on the walls, and the bathroom had a layer of grime that made me gag. The kitchen wasn't much better. The sink was full of dirty dishes, and something unidentifiable was growing in the refrigerator. The locksmith arrived and changed all the locks, installing a deadbolt for additional security. As he worked, I started the massive cleaning job, filling garbage bag after garbage bag with trash they'd left behind. It took me 3 full days to get the apartment back into decent shape. I had to hire professional cleaners for the bathroom and kitchen, and I ended up replacing the carpet in the living room entirely. The total cost for repairs and cleaning exceeded $1,000. Once the apartment was restored to livable condition, I listed it for rent. I took professional photos, wrote detailed descriptions, and set a fair price that would cover my mortgage with extra for maintenance. Within a week, I had multiple applications from qualified tenants. I vetted each potential renter carefully, checking references, running credit checks, and conducting thorough interviews. Finally, I chose a young doctor starting her residency at the local hospital. She had excellent credit, steady income, professional references, and no pets. Most importantly, she understood that this was a business relationship with clear boundaries and mutual respect. We signed a proper lease agreement with all terms spelled out explicitly. The day she moved in, I handed her the keys with a profound sense of accomplishment. This was how it was supposed to work, a professional transaction between responsible adults who respected each other's rights and property. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in months. The rental income would help significantly with my mortgage payments, just as I'd originally planned before Jake derailed everything. For the next few weeks, I enjoyed my peaceful life. I focused on work, advanced in a major project that led to a promotion, started taking yoga classes that actually helped with my stress levels, and continued dating David, who turned out to be everything Mark wasn't: a reliable, honest, and genuinely interested in my well-being. My parents eventually stopped calling, though they sent occasional passive-aggressive texts asking me to stop being stubborn and make amends with your brother. I deleted these without responding, finally free from the obligation to manage everyone else's emotions. Then, about a month after Jake and Amber had moved out, I received a message from my mother that made me pause. "Ruby, I know you're still upset, but I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me." Something in the tone seemed different, less accusatory, more desperate. I hesitated, then decided to return the call. "Mom, what's going on?" There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "Ruby, I owe you an apology. Amber is not who we thought she was." I almost laughed at the understatement, but I kept listening. "She's taken over the guest room like it's her personal suite. She leaves her things everywhere, uses all the hot water, and gets angry if we ask her to clean up." "Sounds familiar," I said dryly. "She's set up rules for us in our own home," Mom continued, her voice breaking a little. "She told your father he couldn't watch TV after 9 p.m. because the noise bothers her. And she invited friends over for dinner without asking me first, then expected me to cook for everyone." The irony was almost too perfect. "That must be hard for you," I said, not entirely without sympathy. "I see now what you were dealing with," Mom admitted. "Can you talk to Jake? Maybe convince him to find their own place? Your father and I are at our wits' end." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you serious right now? You want me to solve your problem after you took their side against me? Ruby, please. We made a mistake. We're your parents, and I'm your daughter, but that didn't stop you from accusing me of being jealous and bitter. It didn't stop you from dismissing everything I said about how they treated me and my property. We were wrong," Mom said quietly. "I'm sorry." The apology should have felt good, but it was too little, too late. "Mom, you and Dad created this situation. You enabled Jake's behavior his entire life. You taught him that rules don't apply to him, and that someone else will always clean up his messes. What are we supposed to do with them?" Mom asked, sounding genuinely lost. "That's your problem to solve, not mine. Just like my apartment was my problem, remember?" There was a long silence on the other end. "Will you at least talk to us again? Come to dinner on Saturday?" I considered it carefully. Part of me wanted to hold onto my anger, to make them suffer the way they'd made me suffer. But another part recognized that this might be an opportunity for real change in our family dynamics. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I'm not fixing this situation for you." "I understand," Mom said. "We love you, Ruby." After we hung up, I sat on my couch, processing the conversation. There was a certain poetic justice in my parents experiencing firsthand what I'd endured. Maybe now they'd understand why I'd taken the stand I did. Over the next few days, I thought carefully about whether to attend Saturday dinner. The old Ruby would have rushed to help, would have felt guilty for not immediately solving everyone's problems. But I was learning to distinguish between helping and enabling, between family loyalty and family manipulation. In the end, I decided to go, not to fix their problems, but to establish new boundaries for our relationship going forward. I needed to see if they'd truly learned anything from this experience, or if they were just looking for a new solution that didn't require them to confront Jake's behavior. When I arrived at my parents' house that Saturday, the atmosphere was tense. Mom hugged me a little too tightly, Dad was unusually quiet, and I could hear Amber's voice carrying from the guest room, apparently on a phone call making demands about something. During dinner, the elephant in the room was impossible to ignore. Jake looked uncomfortable, picking at his food and avoiding eye contact. "We're really grateful you came," Mom said carefully. "We've been thinking a lot about what you said." "About enabling Jake?" I asked directly. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We always thought we were helping him get back on his feet. But maybe we never let him learn to stand on his own," Mom added quietly. It was the first time I'd ever heard them acknowledge their role in Jake's perpetual immaturity. "So what are you going to do about it?" I asked. Jake finally spoke up. "I've been looking for my own place and a steady job. For real this time." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to. But there seemed to be something different there, a weariness, maybe even genuine remorse. "What about Amber?" I asked. Jake's expression darkened. "That's complicated. Living with her has been educational." I gathered that he was beginning to see what I'd seen from the beginning. Sometimes the best teacher is experience, even when it's painful. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating the new dynamics of our family relationship. I made it clear that I wouldn't be Jake's safety net anymore, but I also didn't slam the door completely shut on our relationship. Change takes time, and people deserve opportunities to grow, but only if they're genuinely willing to do the work. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. My tenant was paying rent on time, the money was going toward my mortgage exactly as planned, and I was building the financial independence I'd always wanted. More importantly, I'd learned to value my own boundaries and self-respect over family approval. The little girl who'd always tried to keep everyone happy was growing into a woman who understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from David asking about our dinner plans for the next weekend. I smiled as I typed back a response, looking forward to spending time with someone who respected my boundaries and appreciated my strength rather than trying to exploit my kindness. For the first time in years, I was moving forward on my own terms, without apologizing for protecting what was mine. And that felt like the best ending of all.